It was a typical night like any other when I found myself trapped in the terrifying grip of sleep paralysis. My room was plunged into darkness, and I lay there, unable to move a muscle, with only the eerie silence for company. As panic began to set in, I noticed a presence in the room. A tall, shadowy figure stood at the foot of my bed, its features obscured by the inky blackness. It felt malevolent, like a sinister force that had slipped through the cracks of my subconscious. My heart pounded in my chest as I desperately tried to scream, but not even a whimper escaped my lips. I could only watch in terror as the figure inched closer, its movements slow and deliberate. It was as if it relished my fear, feeding off my helplessness. The shadow loomed over me, its presence overwhelming. I could feel its cold, unseen eyes boring into my soul. It whispered incomprehensible words, a chilling incantation that sent shivers down my paralyzed spine. Suddenly, the room was filled with a cacophony of strange, otherworldly sounds, whispers, screams, and the creaking of phantom footsteps. I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape or wake up from this living hell. Minutes felt like hours as I lay there, trapped in the grip of the malevolent shadow. Finally, with a jolt, I awoke, gasping for breath. The room was empty, but the terror lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadowed watcher was still out there, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. Sleep paralysis had become an all-too-familiar ordeal in my life. Each episode was more horrifying than the last, leaving me to wonder if I was slowly descending into madness. One fateful night, the terror reached a new peak. As my consciousness slipped into the paralyzing abyss, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, chilling me to my core. My eyes were wide open, but I could do nothing but stare at the ceiling. And then, I saw it. A spectral figure hovering above me. The ghostly apparition was translucent, its face twisted in agony. Hollow eyes locked onto mine, sending a surge of dread through my immobilized body. I tried to scream, to plead for mercy, but only silence greeted my futile attempts. The specter descended closer, its outstretched, ethereal hands inching toward my throat. I could feel its icy fingers wrap around my neck, tightening their grip with a malevolence that defied comprehension. My vision began to blur as I struggled for breath, all the while trapped in the unending nightmare of paralysis. Whispers filled the room, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from the very depths of the afterlife. The specter's eyes bore into mine, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I glimpsed the torment it had endured in death. Just as I felt my consciousness slipping away, I awoke with a gasp, drenched in cold sweat. The room was once again empty, but the spectral presence lingered in my memory. I knew that somehow it had been real, and I dreaded the thought of encountering it again. My encounters with sleep paralysis had transformed my nights into a waking nightmare, but nothing could have prepared me for the horrors that awaited me on that fateful evening. As I drifted into the paralyzing grip of sleep paralysis, I became aware of a presence in my room. It was different this time, a sinister presence that filled the air with an oppressive darkness. I tried to scream, but my voice was stolen by the merciless paralysis. The room seemed to stretch and warp around me, its dimensions twisting into a nightmarish labyrinth. I could hear whispers, distant and sinister, like voices from the abyss itself. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, a guttural tongue that sent shivers down my spine. Then, I saw them, shadowy figures emerging from the walls, their forms shifting and contorting in unnatural ways. They gathered around me, their eyes devoid of emotion, as if they were soulless entities sent to torment me. The figures began to chant, their voices growing louder and more unholy with each passing moment. It was a cacophony of despair, a symphony of madness that threatened to consume me. I could feel their spectral hands reaching for me, their touch like ice on my skin. As the whispers reached a deafening crescendo, the room plunged into darkness, and I felt myself falling, plummeting into an abyss of despair. The figures closed in, their malevolence suffocating me, and I knew that this was the end. With a final, desperate gasp, I awoke, my heart racing, and my body drenched in sweat. The room was empty, but the echoes of that nightmarish ordeal clung to me like a curse. It was a night like any other when I found myself trapped once more in the clutches of sleep paralysis. My room was bathed in an eerie, moonlit glow, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. As the weight of paralysis settled upon me, I felt a presence in the room. My heart raced as I saw it, a tall, shadowy figure standing at the edge of my bed. But this was no ordinary shadow. It had the form of a grotesque entity with long, bony fingers. The creature's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly malevolence, and a sinister grin stretched across its inhuman face. I tried to scream, but my voice was a whisper in the void. The entity inched closer, its fingers brushing against my skin, sending a chill down my spine. It leaned in, its foul breath washing over me, and it whispered words in a language I couldn't comprehend. It felt like a dark incantation, a ritual that bound me to its sinister will. I struggled, desperate to break free from its nightmarish grasp. As the entity's grin widened impossibly, the room filled with a cacophony of manic laughter echoing through the walls. I could feel its malevolence seeping into my very soul, and terror gripped me like a vice. With a final surge of willpower, I broke free from the paralysis, gasping for air. The room was empty, but the memory of that grinning entity haunted me, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk in the darkness. Sleep paralysis had become a nightly torment, and I dreaded the moment when the darkness would descend, and I would once again become a prisoner in my own body. One night, as I lay there immobilized, I noticed something unsettling. A mirror on the opposite wall reflected my room. But it wasn't a normal reflection. It was a distorted, nightmarish version of reality. In the mirror, I saw myself, but my reflection was twisted, contorted into a grotesque mockery of humanity. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and it grinned at me with a sinister delight that sent shivers down my spine. As I stared in horror, my reflection began to move independently of me. It reached out of the mirror, its elongated fingers stretching into the room, inching closer to my paralyzed form. I could do nothing but watch as it drew nearer, its intentions unclear but undeniably malicious. The room seemed to warp and shift with each movement of my doppelganger, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive darkness. I felt as though I was teetering on the edge of some abyss, a place where reality and nightmare collided. With a sudden jolt, I broke free from the paralysis, and the room returned to its normal state. But the mirror remained, a sinister reminder of the horrors that can lurk within the mind during the darkest hours of the night. I hope you find these stories equally chilling. If you have any more requests or questions, feel free to ask.